Lucas, re-elected in the last half an hour or so. OK, personal triumph, party triumph, but you're not going to be part, as you probably hoped, of an anti-austerity alliance.
Well, I think the results nationally just show that the politics of fear have sadly outweighed the politics of hope. Essentially, the Conservative Party ran an incredibly negative campaign, basically based on fear. And as a result, they now are going to have another 5 years to inflict austerity and cuts on a nation which, frankly, I don't think can afford it. So I think one of the lessons for tonight will certainly be looking at how progressive parties and progressive individuals within those parties work together more effectively to mount a real challenge to that kind of politics.
Well, detail that to me. What's your thinking, Caroline Lucas? I mean, you're going to have a very, very big contingent of SNP MPs there. Have you been talking? Are you going to talk? Do you want to talk?
Well, clearly the SNP have done immensely well tonight. They have an absolutely, rock-solid democratic mandate there in Parliament. They've also stood on a programme of opposing austerity, and I will work with anybody who wants to oppose austerity. I would also want to work with people who want to put the environment much higher up the political agenda, and I'll be putting pressure on the SNP and all other parties to be much more serious about the climate crisis. So I think we certainly have our work cut out for us over the next few weeks and months.
What's the Green perspective on Scottish independence? You've got a separate party organisation there, of course. Do you think the time is right to revisit that again after an independence referendum just last year?
I don't think that there's any likelihood at all of revisiting that subject again. Nicola Sturgeon has said very clearly that this election was nothing to do with Scottish independence. And so I think rather than bringing up that again, what we ought to be looking at is where there is common cause for progressives to work together to oppose the really, frankly, awful cuts that this government is planning. We know that they've got £12 billion of further cuts to the welfare budget, for example. That is where I would like to be working with the SNP, with Plaid, with anyone else I can find as common cause in Parliament to try to oppose those kinds of policies.
Well, if you can't muster the numbers in Parliament, though, to block any legislation that may be coming, does part of that fight, that anti-austerity fight, have to take to the streets, so to speak, more direct action?
I think what it takes to is looking to a much bigger momentum behind voting reform. The result of the Greens tonight was actually really amazing. Over 1 million people voted Green up and down the country. We had a solid second in 4 other constituencies. And yet, in spite of those 1 million votes, we have just 1 seat. I think as more and more people recognise the discrepancy between the number of votes cast and the number of seats achieved, there'll be even more of a grassroots movement calling for a reform to our broken, decrepit voting system.
And do you think, I mean, if we did get PR, then, on Sauce for the Goose, do you think UKIP would deserve 50 or 60 seats then for their share?
I think you have to reflect the democratic will of the country in your voting system, and if that's what the country votes, then so be it. I don't think you can close down democracy because you don't like the results that it throws up. I'm certainly no fan of UKIP, of course not, but I don't think we can try and shut down a voting system simply for fear of UKIP rising. What we need to do is to address the issues that they are putting on the agenda, show why they are wrong, and get people behind a more progressive alternative.
Caroline Lucas, thank you very much indeed. Re-elected Green MP in Brighton for us.